Today, we're going to talk about everything we know about one of the biggest mysteries the world has ever known, the Mary Celeste. What causes a crew to desert a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean? The American brigantine. Mary Celeste left New York Harbor on November 7, 1872. It was carrying 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol to Genoa, Italy. The 8 crewmen on board the Mary Celeste were all seasoned and highly regarded sailors who were carefully chosen by Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. The $10,000 cost of the repair was a significant sum of money, particularly at the time. Captain Briggs took his wife, Sarah, and daughter, Sophia Matilda, age 2, on the journey with the crew. Everything appeared to be typical. It was a pleasant day, the ship was in good shape, and there was nothing wrong with the cargo. No one anticipated that it would be discovered stranded in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, close to the Azores Islands, with no crew visible, only a month later. On the afternoon of December 4th, a crewman of the Canadian brig Dei Gratia noticed a ship 6 miles away, at full sail, drifting in their direction. Captain Morehouse became concerned of the ship's shaky behavior after the sailor warned him. They signaled the crew to pay heed as they got closer to the ship. When they received no reply, the captain dispatched the Dei Gratia's first and second mates. The sails were somewhat damaged. There were 2 open hatches and a disassembled ship pump. The hold's water level was around 3.5 feet. The crew found the captain's personal items scattered throughout his chamber, including a sheathed sword under the bed. They found the clock, sextant, navigation book, and registry of the ship missing. Everything that belonged to the crew was still packed away nicely. There was still enough food and water to feed the team for 6 months. They could not find a living individual on board. The Mary Celeste was nowhere to be seen. The lifeboat was nowhere to be found. It appeared that the crew abandoned the ship because of an emergency, as evidenced by the missing lifeboat and compass. However, the ship was in good shape and the weather was pleasant. There were no indications of a brawl or struggle. The crew may have abandoned the ship in an emergency, as evidenced by the missing lifeboat and compass. However, the ship was in excellent shape and the weather was pleasant. There were no indications of a struggle or brawl. It had no effect on the freight. The crew must have departed quickly because there was no food being made in the galley. Everything was set up nicely. Considering the condition of the ship and its contents, piracy, mutiny, and murder appeared improbable. What precisely transpired then? Oliver DeVoe, the first mate, was one of 3 seasoned sailors from the Dei Gratia, assigned to the Mary Celeste. The paucity of crew members on each ship made the trip slow, even with the favorable weather. Both ships eventually arrived in Gibraltar. Due to fog, Mary Celeste arrived the day after Dei Gratia docked on December 12th. The mystery surrounding Mary Celeste's crew's mysterious disappearance quickly spread. Some people had doubts about the crew of Dei Gratia. After all, the crew that brought the derelict ship in will receive a portion of its value along with the cargo under maritime rules. On December 17, a salvage court hearing was held in Gibraltar. The Chief Justice, Sir James Cochrane, oversaw the proceedings. Gibraltar's Attorney General, Frederick Solly Flood, believed that the true causes of the mystery surrounding the Mary Celeste were alcohol and criminal play. John Austin conducted an examination of the Mary Celeste on December 23rd. Austin reported that there were cuts on the edges of the bow and bloodstains on the captain's sword. In addition to the wounds, they noticed bloodstains and a deep imprint on one of the ship's rails that might have been made by an axe. On 22 January 1873, both papers and Flood's conclusion were forwarded to the Boards of Trade in London. He claimed that after becoming inebriated from the alcohol in the cargo, the crew killed the captain, his family, and the ship's officers. Before boarding the lifeboat, they allegedly sliced each side of the bow to simulate a collision. Sadly for Flood, his conclusion was riddled with errors. First, it is not possible to drink the alcohol in the shipment. Second, the stains on the ship and sword were not blood, according to scientific examination. Third, according to a U.S. Navy study ordered by the American consul in Gibraltar, the ship's timbers interacting with the sea was the reason for the slashes on the bow. On February 25, 1873, Flood was compelled to disclose the Mary Celeste because to the uncertainty surrounding his conclusion. Unfortunately, the unsolved mystery and lingering doubts surrounding the Mary Celeste resulted in a relatively low salvage prize. The estimated worth of the prize ranged from one-fifth to one-sixth of the overall value of the ship and its cargo. The Mary Celeste then started carrying cargo for its new owners. Because the ship seemed unable to escape misfortune, others believed it was cursed. Over the years, theories about the Mary Celeste crew's disappearance continued. Although the Mary Celeste was not the first ship to be abandoned in the middle of the Atlantic, it was unique and notable due to the crew's unexplained absence. There have never been any survivors discovered, nor were there any bodies. A huge squid, a seaquake, an iceberg, and a broken pump were among the hypotheses. In the ensuing 10 years, it became impossible to distinguish fact from fiction. However, there was no longer any interest in learning the truth. That is, until a short story about a ghost ship named Mary Celeste was published by Arthur Conan Doyle 12 years later. A ghost ship survivor in Arthur Conan Doyle's story, J. Habakkuk Jeffson's statement, related a story of a former slave who wants to exact retribution by murdering every passenger. As a result, public interest in the missing crew was piqued once more. Flood even reopened the probe as a result of the story. Regretfully, the answers were yet undiscovered. So what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste? Here is what we do know. There was no room for piracy, nothing was stolen from the ship. All of the team's personal belongings were still neatly packed. There was also no change in the 6-month supply of food and water. Imagine that pirates boarded the ship and seized nothing. Mutiny seemed unlikely. Briggs was characterized as a fair and responsible skipper. He was a teetotaler and a devout Christian who studied the Bible every day. It was just that he was popular. Additionally, he personally chose every member of his crew, choosing only respectable, seasoned seamen who were unlikely to rebel. Murder was also quite improbable. There was no evidence to support the theory that the Day Gracious crew killed the passengers on the Mary Celeste in order to obtain salvage money. There was even a hypothesis that Briggs slaughtered the crew during a religious outburst. On board, however, there was no indication of violence. Experts explained away all of the cuts and stains. According to some theories, Captain Briggs left the ship in order to defraud an insurance company. Briggs was a member of the syndicate that owned the ship, which was overinsured. Alternatively, he and Morehouse were conspiring to divide the salvage prize between them. However, he enjoyed great respect in his profession. He wasn't known for tricking folks out of their money. Furthermore, Briggs still had a son waiting for him to return, so he couldn't simply vanish. What other evidence do we have? The cargo, as said earlier, was still on board. 9 of the barrels were empty and made of red oak, in contrast to the other barrels, which were made of white wood. Leaks are more prone to happen because red oak is more porous. One of the ship's pumps was left disassembled, and the hold was flooded. The ship was in wonderful shape, save for the flooding. All of the team's belongings were still present. Given these realities, there is just one remaining option. It's more likely that the skipper, his family, and his crew voluntarily departed the boat. Before leaving the ship, Briggs at least had time to retrieve his navigational aids from his cabin. Furthermore, they wouldn't leave the ship until they were in imminent danger. An experienced sailor, Captain Briggs understood the perils of sailing. He had previously lost 3 siblings and other family members to the water. When it comes to the life of his crew and family, he would be extremely cautious and reluctant to take chances. There are 2 possible explanations for the risk that led them to abandon ship. One theory is that the crew abandoned the ship as a result of an explosion produced by fumes from the denatured alcohol. The ship showed no signs of explosion or fire, and the barrels showed no signs of scorch. However, an explosion brought on by alcohol leakage could happen without harming the grip, according to Dr. Andrea Sella of UCL. Captain Briggs is a responsible and diligent leader. Therefore, it would not be shocking if he wanted his crew to leave the ship as quickly as possible. However, if an explosion did happen, there was no indication that anyone was fleeing the ship in a panic. Thus, our alternative theory is that Captain Briggs thought the ship was no longer seaworthy and that they were in risk of sinking. Oceanography data and Attorney General Solly Flood's entries on the ship's log for the final 5 days indicated that Mary Celeste was 120 miles west of their presumed location. A malfunctioning chronometer could be the cause of this. Furthermore, the ship veered north just 1 day before they arrived in the Azores. Bad weather could be one factor. However, an experienced skipper like Briggs cannot leave a ship due to severe weather or a malfunctioning chronometer. Do you recall the flooded hull and the disassembled pump? The Mary Celeste embarked on a coal-carrying journey before undergoing substantial renovations. One of the pumps might have failed as a result of coal dust and construction debris getting inside. This might help to explain why the ship had a disassembled pump. Regarding the floods, some water on a ship's hull was not uncommon. The captain could not, however, gauge the volume of seawater in the hull with the aid of a malfunctioning pump. Although the Mary Celeste was experiencing severe weather, land was visible, 6 miles away to be exact, according to the ship's most recent log entry. Briggs may have believed that now would be the best time to abandon the ship because he was unable to predict whether his vessel would remain afloat. However, what caused them to vanish? The crew most likely became disoriented due to bad weather and a malfunctioning chronometer. They may have ended up floating farther out into the open ocean rather than closer to land. They might not have packed enough food and water since they believed they would get at land quickly. The Dei Gratia searched for the Mary Celeste for 9 days. By that time, the lifeboat's crew might have been completely lost. The Mary Celeste met a tragic end in November 1884 when it was sunk off the coast of Haiti. To obtain insurance money, the captain purposefully ran it aground onto a reef. He failed. He was accused of fraud. Soon after, he passed away. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, continue uncovering the hidden secrets of stories with Whispers in the Dark.